using Hero Designer to help or assist or make characters with the Hero Designer software for the Hero system. In particular, I'm interested in a fantasy game setting that I'm going to be running in the not too distant future, hopefully. Um, so last stream or I, um, went through making of a character. I'll probably do that again, seeing as how I was not able to save the stream because of incompetence of operator. Um, that said, to date, I think I want to work on some prefabs, as they're called, prefabrications. This is how you do a lot or handle a lot of equipment in the system. Um, it makes things a lot easier when you can keep track of actually what equipment is on the character and what it does. This is primarily in regard to weapons and armor, because of course these have e- explicit game oriented results, mechanical systems involved. Um, Unlike, say, a piece of bread, which does not have any game mechanical procedures or processes involved in them. So, with that in mind, we'll turn our attention to the Hero Designer software. We'll click on File and we'll open Prefab. Or not open Prefab, we're going to start with a new Prefab. Duh. Now, I'm going to be using this nice little volume right here, Fantasy Hero for the Hero System 5th edition, because I used 5th edition rules. If that causes a problem for you, I'm sorry. 5th edition and 4th edition Hero Systems are very similar. I know there's a 6th edition out, but I've not really looked at it, and from things I've heard, I probably won't. Sorry, Hero System, but I don't play often enough anymore now to warrant the expenditure to switch to a whole new system. So that said, again, Fantasy Hero for the Hero System 5th edition. It's a nice little softbound compendium. And in it are some nice tables of a lot of weapons. So, page 164, I believe it is. And if I can get there and see the page. For some reason, my multifocal lens glasses, I can't read very well with them. But yes, it is on 164. And because I like to break things up a little bit, we're going to call this prefab axes. Why? Because that's what we're going to be putting in these various types of axes with this one. So axes created by good old me. And then we'll click over here on the equipment tab, because that's what we're doing, is we're creating some pieces of equipment. So that said, let's look and consult the book. What does it say our first axe has? And it's a battle axe, and it says it does not improve the OCV, the offensive combat value. In other words, it's not a more accurate weapon. It does 2d6 of damage with no stun multiplier change. It has a strength minimum and a mass of 1.6. So what is that going to mean? Oh yeah, it's a hand and a half weapon. Well, the 2d6 refers to the damage it does. Now, in Hero System, there are two types of attacks. There are normal attacks, which tend to do more stun than body. In other words, they're more likely to knock you out than they are to kill you. That's normal attacks. There are also killing attacks. Killing attacks tend to do more body, but less stun. They are going to do exactly what they are described as, kill you. So with that in mind, axes and most weapons are killing attacks. So we'll come down here to killing attack, hand to hand, and we're going to call it a battle axe. Now, it is an HKA, a hand killing attack. It is going to be versus PD, not ED. PD and ED stand for physical defense and energy defense. Obviously, an axe is a physical weapon, so it's going to do physical damage. Therefore, you work against or versus physical defense. We know from the book that it does 2 die 6. Now, there is a difference between a ranged killing attack and a hand-to-hand killing attack. A hand-to-hand killing attack, well, there's several differences. Number one, you have to have your hands free to use a hand-to-hand killing attack. This comes into play, well, I'll get to that in a minute. Ranged killing attacks are just that. They are killing attacks that work at a range, bows, guns, so forth. One of the main differences is that with a hand-to-hand killing attack, you get to add your strength to the damage it does. With a ranged killing attack, you do not. With a ranged killing attack, if it does 2 die 6, it does 2 die 6 damage. With a hand-to-hand killing attack, if you add a full 15 points of strength behind it, then you do an extra die of damage. So that's where this 2.5 die 6 with strength, and you're not seeing the pop-up menu. Just a second and I'll change that. There. So we called it a battle axe. It's an HKA. It's versus PD. Now it probably makes a lot more sense what the heck I was rambling on about, right? I've clicked it up to level 2 for 2 die 6 hand killing attack. And with strength, if you have a 10 strength, which is what this is assuming, this battle axe would do 2.5 die 6 with your strength. If you had a 15 strength, it would do a full 3 die 6. If you had more strength, you can add more damage, up to double the damage of the hand-to-hand killing attack. So at most, you could go up to 4 die 6, but that would take you having a 60 strength, which is probably not going to happen in a fantasy setting. 20 strength is normal human maximum. So, you'd have to be some kind of uber creation or a demigod or something to even begin to think about having a 60 strength. Of course, there are other things that can increase damage, but that's another topic, and we'll get to it later on, maybe in another one of these things. So, our battle axe has a weight to it. The Hero system does use kilograms, and that is 1.6 kilograms for a battle axe. And so now we're going to come down here to the Add Modifiers tab. This allows you to add various advantages and limitations to the weapon. Most of what we'll be adding is limitations, but there are such things as a +1 stun multiplier. To figure out the amount of body a killing attack does, you total the amount of the dice. To count up the number of stun, you roll another d6, subtract 1 normally, and that's your stun multiplier. You multiply that by the total of the dice, and that's how much stun it does. So it can range anywhere from 1 to 5. With +1 increased stun multiplier, it can now range anywhere from 1 to 6, because you can counteract the innate -1 that's already there. That said, moving along, you can also create things that affect the solid. In other words, for a fantasy setting, it affects a ghost or something to that effect. You can do area effects, not appropriate for a battle axe. Attack versus limited defense, that's probably not going to be appropriate either. I'm not really going to get into what that is. Not at this time. Maybe if I use it in a later build sometime, I might explain it. Auto fire, though, is multiple shots. Again, not appropriate for most things in a fantasy setting, but if we were in a modern setting and talking about handguns, an automatic weapon would have auto fire. It would shoot multiple shots with each actuation of the trigger, if you will. Based on ego combat value, that means it's a mental attack, which an axe definitely is not. Continuous, that means once it hits and does damage, you can continue to do damage without needing to re-roll. Delayed effect, difficult to dispel, double knockback. Double knockback is not really useful in, again, this heroic level fantasy setting, but knockback is normally you blow the person backwards a certain amount. For the heroic settings, it's usually knocked down, which is half of the knockback. And what this is saying is you double the procedure for getting your amount of knockback or knockdown. Explosion, the effect goes outward but loses damage as it goes outward. Indirect, invisible, which means it can come from another direction. Normally an attack comes directly at you from the wielder, or in this case the wielder of the weapon, so it's definitely not indirect. Um, Invisible power effects, an axe is very visible. Lingering, no. No normal defense, no. Penetrating, nope. Personal immunity, ranged, not with a battle axe. Reduced endurance, yes. A battle axe in itself does not cost you any endurance, any energy to do damage with the axe. You can fall on an axe and hurt yourself very badly, right? So the axe itself has 0 endurance. You may expend endurance using the strength it takes to swing the thing, but the axe itself will cost you no endurance, so we've got to add that. Let's see, the rest of these I'm not really going to go over too much. They're not appropriate right now. Limitations, however, you see we can also subtract from the stun multiplier. But we'll stick with what's really needed, and that is an axe is a focus. It is an actual item that you can separate from yourself. In fact, it's an OAF, as we term it, an obvious accessible focus. It is breakable, but we call it durable. This simply means it has its own defense and body, so somebody can target your focus and try to destroy it. So that's appropriate for a normal, regular, run-of-the-mill axe. The rest of that is meh. And let's see, what else? Okay, so that's focus. It does not take extra time. Yes, that is a problem with some weapons. You might realize they're really heavy, and so instead of hitting right when on the phase, the swing, the action you get to make, it may take some delayed time to get through. But that's not the case for our battle axe, so we can move on. Incantations, no, you normally don't have to incant to wield a battle axe. Let's see. We will put real weapon on it. Where that comes in is this means it needs to be kept up. It needs to be sharpened. It needs to be kept dry, or it'll rust and it'll become less effective. Required hands with the battle axe. It's a hand and a half. So we've got to come in here and 1.5 hand that sucker. And let's see. It does have a strength minimum. The strength minimum listed is a 13. So we come over here to options, click on that, and that's between 6 and 14. But we'll go ahead and put in the comments, strength min 13. Okay. And the strength minimum cannot add or subtract damage. I'll get into that just momentarily. We'll put that on there. And what that strength minimum cannot add or subtract damage gets back into this 2d6 damage. Simply to wield this battle axe, you are going to need at least a 13 strength. So to add any damage to it from just to wield it, you've got to have a 13. So you've got to have more than that to start adding damage to it. So you've got to have an 18 strength, in fact, to get up to 2d6 plus 1. To do 2.5 die 6, you would have to have a 23 strength. So already you're over normal human maximum. And so forth. So that's what all that was about. And I think we are done with our list of adjustment modifiers to the power. And so we click OK. And so now we have our battle axe over here. Actually, I'm going to edit it because you can put in a cost, I believe. Yes. And on another chart in our handy dandy book, it tells us how much equipment costs. And I'm going to go ahead and follow it. And so it's 30 silver pieces, or we'll just leave it at $30. And there we go. And we can actually change that to silver pieces or something like that, and I probably will at some point. So there's our first piece of equipment, a battle axe. We have other types of axes here. We have what's called a Francisca. Okay, so again, it's going to start as a killing attack, and we're going to name it, get the spelling right, Francisca axe. It is again an HKA. It is again against PD. And it does 1.5 die 6 killing damage. So far it's sounding pretty much like our battle axe, right? Okay. But then we get into the modifiers. Well, actually, hold up. We need to set its mass, which is 1.2 kilograms. So it's significantly lighter than our battle axe. And let's go ahead and set the price as well. Kind of wish they had all this information in the same place, but they don't. And that's neither here nor there, really. I'll mark this page, though, since we'll probably be coming back to it. And it's a little cheaper than our battle axe. It's 28 silver pieces. And so now we'll come to our advantages. Once again, the axe itself takes no endurance. So there we go. Now here's one of the big differences between our little Francisca axe here and the battle axe. It can be thrown. So it has a range. And so its range, though, will be based on the character who's throwing it, be based on their strength. So there we go. So it has 2 advantages on it. And this reduces how much strength will add to the damage of the thing. So then we go back to limitations. Once again, it's a focus, an OAF. It can be knocked out of your hand readily. It is obvious that it is an axe. So there we go with that. And let's see, what else did we put on it? Oh yeah, it's got a strength minimum. It is a real weapon. Okay. We can put the required hands on there. We don't have to because it's one-handed, which is, as you can see, -0. It's neither an advantage nor a disadvantage. And then we have strength minimums, which for the Francisca is 12. So again, we come up here to that and put in our comments. Strength in 12. And again, the strength minimum cannot add or subtract damage. Now, I will get into, this is important for determining in the end how much damage this weapon can do. But, trying to think here, sorry. If we were buying this in a superhero campaign where you are not allowed equipment, you have to buy everything as a power, this not being able to would increase the limitation, basically because some of your strength is not being allowed to go to increasing the damage of this weapon. So there we have it. And that's why I'm including it, simply because I want it on the record what goes on with this thing. So there we have that. We've gone through all limits, and so we'll add it to our list of axes in this prefabrication, this prefab. And we can continue on and on and on with this. And I'm going to leave it there for right now because there are more axes. There's, in fact, 3 more beyond this. But the process is basically the same. You choose the power that is being engaged, exploited by the piece of equipment, and you go from there. So I'm going to go ahead and save this for now. I'll be back later to brew it. So we come over here to the current prefab, save prefab as, and we'll go to my appropriate folder, general weapons prefabs, and you can see I've already done a whole bunch of these things as individual. I recently learned, as in this afternoon, prepping for this a little bit, that you could stack them all in one prefab, and we'll call this axes, save, and that's how easy it is. So the other big important thing with all of any type of fantasy setting is armor. So we'll go through next how to make up some armor. So let me come over here and find that page where it lists out all the armors. And we're just going to worry with full suits of armor. With Hero System, you can also do piecemeal armor. It only covers part of the body. So you might have a leather cap, but a chainmail halberd. So you can do things like that, and it's pretty nifty. That's one of the reasons why I like this system so much. You can do anything you want if you can think up and work out a reasonable system of how to work these powers. So let's open a new prefab. Oh, not open it. Create a new prefab. And we're going to call this one cloth and hide armors. So cloth and hide, made by good old me. And so we'll come over here to equipment again, the equipment tab. Because again, one of the differences is this system is known for playing superheroes, but a superhero has to pay character points, actual points out of their possible stash of character creating points to get any power or effect. With heroic level, you're allowed to buy equipment. Those don't cost you any of your character's character points. They just cost you money. So with that in mind, we'll get into armor, again starting with cloth and hide. So the first type of armor is heavy cloth. Neatly enough, there's a nice little power here called armor. So we'll click it, and we'll type in its name, heavy cloth. And its special effect is armor. It is displayed as armor. Its special effect is default. You know, you can change that as well. You know, make it acid, wind. The reason this comes into play is because one of the comments frequently made about Hero System is that special effect is king. There's really only one type of attack power. It's an energy blast. This is just your standard direct, boom, I'm hitting you for damage type normal attack. And what the special effect is king is referring to is that's one power. I don't need a power for firebolt, icicle blast, water blast. Those are all special effects on the power. Well, heavy cloth armor, we'll just say it's the default power. Alright, looking at our book, it has a defense of 1. Now they shortcut in the notations in these handbooks for Hero System. Defense means both PD and ED. So heavy cloth armor has 1 PD, 1 defense, which means 1 PD, 1 ED. Now, one thing we don't have to worry about here is armor is already resistant defense. Remember, there are 2 types of attacks, normal attacks and killing attacks. Normal attacks Any PD is good PD, any ED is good ED against that attack. With killing attacks, though, if your defense is not resistant, you have no defense. Okay? That's what important distinction is because as a character, you have a base amount of PD and ED based on your strength and your con, respectively. But those are non-resistant. In other words, they will work against a normal attack, but a killing attack blows right through them. Okay? So this is like an unarmed, armored man being hit by the battle axe we made. He has no resistant defense unless he has armor or has some kind of weird skin condition that his skin is just like boiled leather or something. So the battle axe just cleaves right through him. He has no defense, no resistance to that damage. If he had on this heavy cloth armor, he would have at least one. So that's why we worry about armor and why we worry about such things as resistant defense or non-resistant defense. Okay, so going into that and finishing out our nice little thing here, heavy cloth armor has a weight. That annoys me a little bit as a scientist because kilograms is a mass, not a weight, but that's neither here nor there. That's just a little gripe I have. All right, and flipping back, it has a cost of there we go, 20 silver pieces. And we're starting to have to mark a lot of pages in this book. All right, and so now we'll click on Add Modifier. And once again, you notice though our list of available advantages has decreased significantly. Effects D-Solid, some ghosts can reach out and touch you, and so you may want your armor to be where it'll affect these D-Solid characters. There's delayed effect, difficult to dispel, because your powers can be dispelled or suppressed. Hardened, that gets into, there are a couple of advantages that will go through defenses more easily. Hardened is just that, it's hardened against those advantages. There is inherent, time delay, trigger, uncontrolled, usable on others, variable advantage, variable special effects. So there's some nice little things there. Most of them are completely inappropriate to what we're doing with this fantasy setting and heroic level characters. So, you know, this isn't Colossus or Spider-Man or somebody like that. Limitations, though, once again, it is a focus. Now, armor, unlike a weapon, is an OIF, an obvious inaccessible focus. The difference between an inaccessible focus and an accessible focus, like the weapons, is that a weapon is out here in your hand. It is exposed. It's its own entity. It is easily targetable. It is easily recognized. Now, that's the obvious part, actually. The inaccessible focus means they can't just knock it out of your hand. They can't just snatch it away from you like a necklace. Okay? Would take time to remove it from you. And that's what the inaccessible is all about. We're once again going to set it breakable but durable. Again, this is just some record keeping for this level of game play. But it's good for bookkeeping. So we'll put that in there. And let's see. Again, armor doesn't cost endurance, but we could make it such if we really wanted to. I can't really think of a reason why you'd want to, but or need to, I guess, would be more of the issue. Coming on down, we could do limited coverage, and that gets into where you can have armor that only covers certain locations, certain areas of the body. Mass. This is one I like to add on to armors, again, as a bookkeeping thing, because armor has weight. It has mass. It has bulk. It slows you down. It makes you less dexterous. It does all of these little things. So it's nice to have on, but you're not getting that for nothing. So we put mass on it. We'll put real armor. It has to be maintained just like a weapon with the real weapon limitation. Um, Now, it does not require particularly hands or a skill roll. It is not restrainable. And again, sectional defenses, I think, is actually where we get into, yes, that's where we get into it protects only parts of the body. And so we're done there. And we have now made our first piece of armor uh, in heavy cloth. So that's kind of neat. We'll do one more. There's padded, excuse me, padded cloth. You can tell with this epidemic that's going on, I'm not used to talking a whole lot. So, yeah. So padded cloth, we'll name it. It has 2 defense. So we put 2 PD and 2 ED on it. It has a mass of 5.1 kilograms. Oh, just 5 kilograms, 5.0. And the cost of there it is. Padded cloth, 40 silver pieces. And again, we'll click on our add modifiers. None of the advantages are again appropriate. But again, the same limitations are appropriate. It is OIF. It is obvious it is armor, but it is inaccessible in that you can't just knock it away. It is breakable, but it's durable. Okay. It has mass. Oops, I need to change that. We'll get to that in just a second. It is real armor. And we're done. So how can I edit that because I did it? Oops. Well, edit. And we'll call it normal mass. And there we go. And so we are now finished with our padded cloth. And this is, again, how you make up these pieces of equipment. Now, I'm going to, again, stop here. We'll go to the current prefab. We'll save the prefab as. It's not an axe. It's not a general weapon prefab. It is armor. And you can see I've played around with some things in the past. And what did we call it? Cloth and hide. Clotho. That's another matter entirely. Cloth and hide. And I'll come back later and add in a lot of these things when I'm not trying to entertain you as well as everything else. So that's how we create equipment. I will put up another video at another time where, as I mentioned at the beginning of this one, I will create another character and actually save the video this time. And we'll show you how to include these prefabs, and in particular specific ones. Like you'll load the prefabs and you don't have to take both heavy cloth and padded cloth. You can single them out into your character, and I'll go over that when we get to that video, when I do that again. So we'll close this prefab, and the last thing I will do tonight is look at a spell, because I am doing spells differently this time. So we'll call this prefab Fire Spells, and it's made by me, and you don't have to put that in, obviously enough. And so we'll save the prefab as. You really should do that type of thing at the beginning. We'll come over here at spells. We'll come under custom. Fire spells. I used to work with some Unix and Linux based systems, so you can see I don't put spaces in my file names. I put underscores. Old habits die hard. So, what I was saying about spells and how I'm doing them differently than a lot of people do. Um, Powers are expensive, and so if I made wizards or priests buy their spells as powers, um, they would be walking around with maybe three, maybe four spells, and they're a wizard and a heroic level wizard at that. That didn't make a whole lot of sense. So I'm trying something different. To me, a wizard's firebolt spell is no different than a warrior's bow and arrow. So, with that in mind, spells are equipment. Seems a bit odd, but there we have it. So, I'm going to come over here to the equipment tab. Oh, and the rest of that is the wizard then just has to buy a skill with the particular spell they have as equipment. So, we're going to start out with that aforementioned firebolt spell. And so, what power would that be? Well, it's probably a killing attack, and it shoots out of his hand, so it's a ranged one. So we'll make it an RKA, a ranged killing attack. Firebolt. It displays as an RKA. It is fire, so that's not a physical punch into the target. It's a you're on fire. So it is ED instead of PD, energy defense instead of physical defense. Obviously, as a as a player, you might try to argue something differently. I, as a game master, might interpret something as being energy based and needing energy defense to defend against it. But you could make an argument that fire is still burning your physical form. I'm not going to buy that particular one, but there are some attacks out there that it can be argued which type of defense it should go against. We're going to leave this firebolt spell because it's just a little ping at 1 die 6. Okay? It has no weight. It's a spell, so it's up here in the brain. It may or may not have a price because this setup does mean that you can probably not purchase spells, but you could come across a spell book and learn them that way, or you could invent them by having the inventor skill and working out how to do the new spell on your own. So with that in mind, we'll go on from there. We'll add modifiers. I don't see any reason to add a +1 stun multiplier to the firebolt. It's not going to be an area of effect. I'll get to one of those after this one. Armor piercing, no. Auto fire, no. Continuous, no, no, no. Line of sight, lingering. We could do something like lingering on it if it sets things on fire, but we're saying this is just an instant pulse of fire. So there's really no advantages that we want to stick on there. So we'll go on from there to limitations. Beam is kind of a cheat to me. Beam says it must always do maximum damage, and it can't be what's called spread or bounced. So in this case, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it can't be spread or bounced, so beam would probably be appropriate. Spread means it can affect a wider range, makes it easier to hit the target, but it does less damage. Okay, so moving right along to limitations, going on with our limitations. It's not on charges. It is a spell, so we could put concentration on there, but you know what? I'm going to give it a break. This is a pretty low-level spell, so we're not going to have concentration on it. We are, however, I'm getting ahead of myself. We could put a focus limitation on it if it requires a wand, like a certain fantasy setting we all know and maybe love, maybe not anymore. It could require an amulet, it could require a staff. I'm going to make this one where it doesn't. But it will require gestures, and it is going to require incantations. When you're a wizard, you're marking yourself. You have the gestures out there and incantations. Let's see, what else? I'm going to put that it doesn't do any knockback. It's a little pulse of flame that hits you. It's not going to exert any pressure backwards or anything like that. So that's going to be it. I think. Oh, yes. The most important, and I require this of all spells in my game, requires a skill roll. Now, I do give you a break that it's only -1 per 20 active points. Now, let me close this window out, and since we're done with what I'm going to put on this, we'll click back to this. Champions and Hero System keeps track of points, character points, in two different ways. Active points over here basically is a measure of how potent a power is. Active points are figured from the base cost of the power plus any advantages, any modifiers that add to that. And that's why advantages are given by +1 and so forth. So we didn't add any advantages on this, so 1d6 killing attack is 15 character points, and so the active points is 15. With all these limitations, though, we've cut that cost to the real cost, which is only 7 points. So active points basically give you a measure of how effective, how powerful, how potent the power is, whereas real cost is the actual character points, if this weren't a piece of equipment, that it would cost you to have this power. Alright, so hopefully that made sense. If not, ask a question, slow me down, stop me. Alright, so with that in mind, this one is pretty much done. Bam, we've got a firebolt. Okay, so now let's say we want to do an explosive one. We'll call it just that. We'll use the good old time and tried and true name, Fireball. Now we're going to up this one a little bit. We're going to make it do a die and a half. You know what? No, we're going to go ahead and make it do a full 2d6 damage. Alright. Come up to our add modifiers again. This one we're not going to add the stun multiplier or area effect, but we are going to make it an explosion. Alright. What the explosion does is at ground zero, where you target the thing, it does its full damage. I'm going to close out this window so I can see. So in this case, where you target it, the hex, everything in Champions works off of the hex system instead of a square. So if you're used to thinking square when I say hex, just think of a square. The square, the hex that you target that spell in, takes anything in that takes 2d6 of damage. Okay? That said, when you go out one more hex, it loses 1 damage class. In other words, it goes from 2d6 to 2.5d6. Another hex out from that, it's down another one to our die and a half, and now it's down to 1 die plus 1. Another hex after that, it's down to half die 6, and finally 1 die 6. So it loses, with an explosion, it loses effectiveness as you move away from that center, that targeted zone. And so it's nice because, as we also jokingly say in this system all the time, I don't have to hit you, I just have to hit your hex. And your hex has a DCV, a defensive combat value of 3, as opposed to your typically 5 to 8. So it's definitely much easier to hit your hex than it is necessarily to hit you. So that's where these explosive type things come in handy. So again, we're going to call it gestures. We're going to call incantations. We are going to let this one do knockback because it's a concussion. And we're going to put requires a skill roll in it. Again, -1 per 20 active points. And I need to explain that one a little better, like I said I was going to earlier. Okay, so that -1 per 20 active points, you have a skill for Fireball in your character. Now, this is going to give you a roll to accomplish this skill of casting Fireball of 9 plus your intelligence divided by 5. So let's say you're a smart wizard and have a 15. Normal human intelligence is 10. You say you're a smart guy, you have a 15. So 15 divided by 5, 3 plus 9 is 12. And so you normally have to cast this spell a 12 or less on 3d6 chance of casting it. What the skill roll does is for every 20 active points of that power, remember what active points mean over here, you take a -1 to that roll. So in this case, with 45 active points, that would be a -2. So actually, Mr. 15 Intelligence would only have a 10 or less on 3d6 chance of properly casting this Fireball spell. So he's probably going to be happy I didn't put side effects on it. So, there's that. Speaking of side effects, let's do another spell. Yay! Let's call this one Fire Cloak. Cloak. Okay. This one again is going to be a ranged attack. We're going to make this one do a die and a half. And come up here with our modifiers. There's one in particular I'm looking for. And I'm not seeing it. Well, we can go ahead and do this. Gestures. Incantations. I'm big on gestures and incantations, not foci, but that's me. We're going to put no range on this. Okay, and requires a skill roll. Like that. And now let's come over here. And no, I'm still not getting that. Okay, unavailable. The one I'm looking for is that one. Damage shield. Can only be applied to a constant, persistent. Oh, that's right. I've got to make the power constant. And now I can make it a damage shield. But I've got to take the limited range, the no range off of it, because damage shield automatically makes it no range. Alright, and we're done with that. I think so. Got everything on here. Gestures and candidates requires. And you can see the huge jump in active points that this spell has over the previous two, and the huge jump of real cost. And what this is it's a cloak of fire that the person pulls around them, hence the gestures. And, you know, now they're surrounded by flames, and somebody getting close to strike them with a sword or something like that is going to take 1.5 d6 of damage because of the flames that now surround this character. But that brings up one thing, because that's still a lot of real point costs. This one will have a side effect. In other words, if you fail to cast this one properly, it's going to hurt. Something bad happens. I think you can see what might be bad about, what kind of bad might happen about pulling a cloak of fire around yourself. So, this is not a minor side effect. It's a major one. And bam. So that reduced the real cost somewhat, but it didn't reduce that active cost. So the person who has this spell in their repertoire is going to have -3 to the spell. This is not a spell for the faint of heart, is the bottom line. And bam. There's 3 spells in our fire spells. Now, let's look at these endurance costs. I do require all spells. This is another limitation I have on my wizards. They're getting their spells as equipment, but all of them must cost endurance. They must cost energy from the caster. So the firebolt only costs one, so he can fire that probably pretty much all day. All day, every day, maybe twice on Sunday. Um, the fireball takes 4 endurance. He's probably not going to want to throw that one, probably to the appreciation of his fellows, um, because that's going to take a significant amount of energy. I mean, the average human has 20 endurance. So if this wizard gets 3 actions in a round, in a turn, because he has a speed 3, if he casts fireball each of those times, he just spent 12 of his potentially only 20 endurance. He's not going to do that too often, and that's the whole point. The fire cloak takes 6. So we're probably going to do some juggling with that, because if he's got a speed of 3 and gets 3 actions, this guy is going to cost him 18 endurance for that round. Well, who's going to put that up? So let's edit it a little bit. I still want it to cost endurance, but there is another nice little advantage modifier called reduced endurance. And so we will half its endurance, which has the unfortunate side effect of bringing up the active points to 69. So fortunately enough for him, that's not enough to make it a -4 to his skill roll. It's still only -3, but now it only costs him 3 endurance to draw his fire cloak around him. Alright, we've gone on for nearly an hour now. I've rambled on. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat window or anything. So I'm going to call it a night here after saving the prefab. And here's another one that I'll just add things as players bring up good fire-based spells, or as I come up with other ones, or more powerful versions of this. Maybe a higher level wizard, if you will, has a more potent firebolt he can shoot out of his fingertip. But I think these are all I'm going to work with tonight. I think I've given you a view of how to make these equipment prefabs. And next time I'll probably just go ahead and do another character creation scenario and show you how to include these prefabs into a character. So with that said, we'll close all of this out and we'll call it a night. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope anybody who sees this after tonight enjoys as well. And we'll see you then. Have a good one.